gonna keep going. We're not going into a break. Like both players look pretty ready, and
We do have the deck list on the screens
Yes.
right now. Volvi, I think we have not seen on stream
no,
yet.
he was the submarine of this tournament. Like he started 1 and 2, and he hasn't lost since. Wow. So he has kind of the same run as Eatshock that we just saw, just with a 1 and 2 record before that, and then he went 7-0 since that point. Because he also has an extra match coming from the lower bracket. So this is, I think, their 4th match, and high stakes match. Like I know both players. Like Fishu is a super experienced player. Volvi is a little crazy. You'll notice that when you'll see him on the cam. So I don't think pressure is gonna get to either of them. But it's more like, I don't know what time it is, but they've been playing for a solid 10 hours at this point. Like fatigue at some point, and that's the thing with tournaments. You're not home, so you have that adrenaline, that thing, and at some point it kind of hits you, and you need to know how to deal with it.
And there is one big difference between Eatshock's runs and Volvi's run, because Volvi had to sweat all the way through. He did not know whether or not he was gonna make top 8 until his very final group stage game. And unfortunately, we couldn't catch it on the main broadcast earlier on, but he was shouting and screaming of joy. He was incredibly happy to have made it, and he must be much more exhausted than most players coming into this final game.
Volvi is one of my closest friends in real life, and actually after the rounds, he came to me because when he qualified for top 8, he was 5 and 2. And he was super happy, and he started running around the venue. And he actually told me, "Oh man, I'm old. I fucked up my knee." So we'll see. So Spessy is replacing Fresh Lobster for this loser bracket semifinal.
Yep.
And well, I guess you got the deck list in front of you, so let's jump right into it.
Yeah, big up to Fresh Lobster for that cast. I was really enjoying that game. I was just chatting to
It was such
Moyen
a
after
good
it.
game.
He's like really umming and erring about like, did he make the right play? But I think he kind of had to respect the Shang-Chi, and he was saying that it was pretty much with the line he went for. It was only Bucky and Magneto exactly which he was losing to.
This is the thing that we were discussing with Fresh on broadcast is in the last turn, there was no right decision. Like, you do something and your opponent has the punish, you lose. You do something else, it was kind of a loop where if I do this and he does this, I lose. But if I anticipate this, I do this. But then if he figures out, he changes his play and you have no right decision. Like, you have to pick something. Like, you couldn't retreat anyway. The game was on the line. So I don't think like Moyen has anything to feel bad about. And
Agreed.
he's not out of the tournament. Like, just regroup. You still got a match, and you can play Eatshock a 3rd time and make it right this time.
Yep, he's top 3 guaranteed. So let's look at the list. Fishu with this Thanos Lockjaw deck, which we saw him high rolling that blue marble just a couple of games ago. And then there's this Electro Greedy deck with no Chavez in this one. But Chavez is in the Thanos deck, so you can only play Chavez in one deck. So
And I'm a little curious about Jubilee, because Jubilee is a good inclusion in Electro, but most of the time you play her alongside Jeff, because it opens this 6 or 7 where you play Jubilee and Jeff, because even with Electro and Sandman, you're allowed to play Jeff. And this is the first time I see Jubilee without Jeff in Electro. But I guess, I don't know if it's like because he took a Jeff list, and because he has Thanos in the other deck, he just took it out, or does he just like Jubilee as a card?
yeah, I mean, Jubilee is a weird one because even though it's a 4 energy card, like you almost feel bad about playing it on turn 5. But with how top heavy these decks are, the Jubilee high roll potential is through the roof. Like Jubilee into Odin is just obscene value. So in some situations where you feel like you just don't quite have the hand, just slamming a Jubilee on turn 5 and high rolling the Odin really can open up some interesting lines.
I mean, he has 5-6 costs. So Jubilee is almost always, like, let's say you had Electro or Wave already, almost always 50-50 to pull something big. And if that's Odin, as you said, you could win the lane on the spot.
The other huge thing with Jubilee is if you Jubilee into something like Doom or Jubilee into something like Leader, that sets up a huge Odin potentially on
And
6.
then, yeah, you get the threat of this. And so that was Fishu. Let's talk a little bit about Volvi. The pool 3 player.
Ah, Pull 3
Zero series
exclusive.
card.
What a Chad.
Yeah, so if anyone is like, yeah, Marvel Snap is pay to win, Volvi would like to have a word. And we have, like, I guess 2 of the best historically. Like, these 2 have been around better. Like, yeah, I remember people were playing these in August. Not these exact lists, but the archetypes. And I don't really know what to pick, because Patriot is in this tournament because it counters, at least is really good against Electro Ramp.
Yep.
And at the same time, I see an armor in the Thanos Lockjaw. So I guess that's 2 good reasons to not go for Death Wave.
Yep.
But if you think like this, do you think like, all right, so Fishu's the smart man, he's going to figure this out. So he's going for Electro Greedy because he knows I'm not going to pick No, that doesn't work.
I
no.
think my
You have to pick
opinion on
Thanos
this
Lockjaw.
kind of format where you have 2 decks and it's a blind pick, in some situations like this, it almost becomes a coin toss as which deck to go for, right? You can kind of like mind game it. It's almost like a penalty shootout on FIFA. You go left, you go middle, you go right, and you can really think about it, but ultimately the keeper's just going to dive one way, and in a similar sense, you could pick this deck, but ultimately it's like, who knows what your opponent's playing.
So I'm going to put Volvi and Patriot. Just go.
Yeah, I would agree, because his opponent, Fishu, doesn't have Patriot. We talked earlier with Volvi where he said he would love to put Super Scroll in this Patriot
Yeah,
deck
if you
in
could change
hindsight,
something.
in a mirror, and because there's no threat of the mirror, I think Patriot makes a lot of sense. You mentioned the armor against Deathwave. That's definitely going to be a key card. However, in a Thanos deck, obviously it's much more difficult to draw that armor consistently compared to other
True.
decks.
But the other thing is, and I think this is why Fishu brought Thanos Lockjaw in the first place to this tournament, is that Lemby series was like the person I think would popularize Thanos Lockjaw after the patch in the ongoing form. One of his tweets was, I played the tournament with the deck and I beat Patriot consistently. And the thing Fishu was saying in the interview was, I got that wrong because Super Scroll was in Patriot. But Volvi doesn't have Super Scroll in Patriot, so probably Fishu believes this Thanos Lockjaw is good against Volvi's Patriot because no Super Scroll.
Yep. It's going to be really interesting to see which deck each player picks. Also, like the resurgence of Deathwave, I feel like it happens at the start of every patch and then maybe falls off a little bit.
It's just a
further down the
great
line.
deck for everyone. Like, you don't really know what to do, and there haven't been that many armors in the deck. I was expecting a lot more. Like, to me, if you have 2 decks to bring, you probably have Lizard in one of them, and then it's like Daredevil, Scorpion, Armor. These are like the second layers of 2 costs, and I haven't seen Armor in many lineups.
No, Armor has not been as popular. Obviously, the Sunspot nerf, only a point, but it's had a huge impact.
Definitely.
Armor, Sunspot, a very popular combo. Of course, the Shuri decks were playing Armor as well, but they are far less popular. So, yeah, a resurgence of Deathwave does make quite a bit of sense. And the other alternative to this deck is going for like a Doom Wave deck, which on paper sounds so good. You just don't play the Death, which means you don't have to play all the Destroy stuff, and you can play things like Iceman, maybe Scorpion instead. But there's something just so powerful about being able to play that Death, that She-Hulk, and something else on the final turn.
And in a way, Volvi solved the problem. He put Doom in Deathwave. Like, we were discussing it at some point, and we talked about Deathwave, and I had the argument at some point, and I was like, to me, Deathwave is just a more riskier Doomwave.
Yeah.
And then he was like, why do you like Doomwave so much? And I was like, I think Doom in the current metagame, I think you have Doom in your lineup. In this tournament, not having Doom in your lineup was probably a mistake because you expect so much of Electro Sandman. And then he just told me like, okay, if you want Doom, I'll put Doom in Deathwave. And actually, it was just so simple. You know, sometimes it's like, why go complicated? Why change the deck? Just, all right, I just change a card, not a deck.
Yeah, I think the Doom in Deathwave became quite popular when it was the proper aero meta, because it was the big counter to this play was aero. Like, you slam your She-Hulk, your Death, and another card, but then aero pulls all 3 into one lane, whereas then people started putting Doom in there, and suddenly you're getting 8 cubes by including a Doom, and I think it really caught on from there. So, really excited to see which deck each player brings. I think we are very, very close to starting this one in the losers bracket. Let's see which
So
deck
Patriot
each
for
player.
Volvi L'Oreal, Thanos and going for Fishu. So kind of the expected decks, and this is where I was wondering, like, can Volvi go brain it and think like, okay, Fishu knows he beats Patriot with Thanos and going. Do we go against Armor with Deathwave? I guess he went for a no, and pretty strong hand for Volvi.
And
like,
Volvi's
already.
absolutely vibing over here. We love to see it. I think there's going to
This
be a
is
Volvi
nothing
jam emote.
for Volvi. This is nothing for Volvi. Like, he's just warming up.
Oh, I'm excited for this. Is it his first time on main stage today?
No. Oh, today? Yeah. This is the first time it's been streamed today.
Yes.
Well, they're both part of the streamer crew. So they haven't been streamed during the Swiss round, and Fishu was playing on stage in the previous match. But Volvi was playing again. I think his loser bracket run was Owi, and then he played against Shisha. So he took Shisha out of the tournament that we saw against Ichak in the winner's first match.
So we see the Dino coming down and the Shocker on the other side into Atlantis.
This is a turn 2 Dino. Ooh, Nexus. I guess you regret a little bit where you placed the Dino. Just a
Yeah,
little.
there is a Shang-Chi though for Volvi, and that's like a huge impact on this Nexus because
Definitely.
you can't just put big points in there early. What's nice for Fishu though, this Iron Man. Iron Man could go
On
into
Nexus,
the Nexus,
it's nuts.
and it's big points, but it isn't changing the initiative. What you really want to be doing is playing the Iron Man on turn 5, and then on turn 6 you can play a big card like a Thanos, for example, and then suddenly you've got 20 points into every location, and you're playing around Shang-Chi.
Yeah, and it's important to know because it's open deck list. Volvi in his Patriot list has nothing to counter Iron Man.
Yep. Here we see the Iceman come through, and it does snipe the Shang-Chi.
Okay, so
Which-
it doesn't break the Patriot Mystic synergy, but at the same time, because we have Ultron now, and it's so good on Altar of Death, I think Patriot and Mystic are probably going to come down earlier.
6 energy available for both players on turn 4. Altar of Death having a huge impact on this one.
Do you just slam Patriot Mystic now on Atlantis? But you have to
Quite
be worried,
possibly.
like, Fishu has a Profex. Like, Fishu could just go Profex Nexus now, and if Volvi doesn't have enough points, which Patriot historically doesn't do so well, like, early in the game. Usually they explode when they activate everything.
We could see a cheeky Professor X come through here from
Yeah.
Fishery to like lock down the Nexus. He does go for the Iron Man. Now, one thing that Volvi could try to do is just also not play anything into the Nexus until the final turn, meaning that Fishu would have initiative going into turn number 6, and that would give him some Shang-Chi value potentially.
Okay, so Fishu is like, all right, I'm off, and Volvi's like, nah, I'm not playing
He
this
doesn't
game.
want it.
There's just way too much eye roll in there, so...
He doesn't want it. The Professor X could have come down somewhere there as well and surprised him. And I want to talk about the timing of the snap here from Fishu. It's something we saw in the last series a lot. Both people are seeming to rope a lot and then snapping right at the end of the rope. What is the logic behind that one, Dan?
So there are 2 ways of doing it. First is you want to count and make sure you have everything down before you snap. And Fishu is I feel like he's a really calm player, like he likes to think about everything. And the other thing is, sometimes, this is what we call the scumbag snap, is you're going to snap right before the end of the timer, and if your opponent is not careful enough, they won't have time to react to it, and the turn's going to pass, and you're just going to get the snap through.
Yeah.
I don't think Fishu is using that this way. I just think he's just a player that likes to take his time, but on ladder, we have seen a lot of people do it this way.
Yeah, and I think in the previous game we saw it so often, the late snap, and from a play optimization point of view, there's a couple big benefits, right? Like, you're giving your opponent less time to think about it, because if you snap super early on and they haven't locked in their play, they have the whole turn to think about it. But also, at the moment, if you lock in your play, when your opponent snaps, you can't change your mind. Like, a snap gives away some information, right?
Of course.
So, therefore, your opponent's locked in, and they're not going to be able to change their play based on the snap. And that's actually going to change in the future. Second Dinner have confirmed that if someone snaps, it's going to give you the option to change the positioning of your cards.
Yes.
We're in turn 5 already in this one, though, so let's have a look at what is going on here.
Well, there are a lot of rocks.
We've got Baxter building, not a lot of points on the board for either player.
Yeah, and once again, Fishu is presented with that choice of going Iron Man or Professor X somewhere. I think Volvi just played a Shocker, which isn't that great, and Onslaught isn't gonna do anything, so I guess it's just gonna be like Ultron, but Ultron on Sewer System doesn't do anything either. Oh, that Professor X is gonna be scary because there's both Misty Knight and Shocker on Baxter Building, so if a Patriot comes down, Baxter Building is gonna explode, like point-wise.
And Fishu, of course, we've seen his Blue Marvel earlier on in the tournament.
Yeah,
so
Volvi
in an
has it
open
this
deck
time.
list, Volvi has to respect Fishu's Blue Marvel. Fishu doesn't have it, but
Yeah, but Volvi has it. So he actually, well, he has to respect it because he has 3 cards against 4. So that's a pretty big difference. So if they both play Blue Marvel, Fishu comes out on top.
yep. And it's so impactful in particular because
Volvi's
of
gonna
Baxter Building.
retreat again.
Yeah,
apparently, like, he pressed the retreat later button, taking it slow. I guess he's like he's feeling the vibe, checking what his opponent is doing, and well, we have caster vision, so we know it's a bit unfortunate because actually Fishu didn't have that good of a hand this time.
Yep.
But unfortunately, like I really feel like if Volvi goes through with that Blue Marvel play, he probably just wins the game. Because wherever you play Blue Marvel, if your opponent doesn't play both lanes, you're winning the other one.
Yep. But I think Fishu, like, realizing actually, okay, it's only 2 cubes. And basically here, you're paying 1 cube to a chance of winning of 1, right? If you fold here and you lose a cube, well, you could win 2. And
Yeah.
he does get look at the reaction, quite surprised. This is a situation where maybe, like, if Wolfie snapped, then Fishu would have been forced to retreat, but the snap would have made very little sense from Wolvie, but just from the point of view of each player, it's very interesting when you can see both hands.
And I really like what Fishu is doing right now. So he's like taking notes, writing down stuff and everything. Like, it's something that we don't see too much in tournaments anymore. But I feel like, especially in card games, like, we're pretty quiet people, games are pretty slow and everything. I feel like this is kind of like the old school way of playing. But obviously for Fishu, it's been working really, really well.
Yeah, I love that decision to just take a moment after each game, clear the mind, move on to the next one. And yeah, just perfect time to write down some notes. I've tried doing some note-taking in some games myself during the game, and I almost felt like it distracted myself. So
it's a skill. It's really difficult to actually do it because you take your eyes off the game for a little bit, and so sometimes you come back and you're like, wait, what was the situation? Like, what were the math on this location or something like that?
And it also takes up some of your time, right? And
Of
if you're not
course.
the best at maths like myself, then that's precious time I could be using elsewhere.
And now we have Shocker against Sentinel. Volvi's like struggling in the mid game, I feel, lately. Like, he's always had Onslaught or like Ultron in the end, but he hasn't found like that Patriot blowout yet.
Nomura going to be preventing the cards from revealing this turn, which also means that Sentinel won't go into the hand for a little bit. And this is not a nice hand at all. The Sentinel would have been really quite useful here for Volvi, because Mystique is the only option on turn 4. And I think Volvi is pretty much ready to concede this one. But of course, with no snap, there's no point. Could the Reality Stone low roll
Ooh,
and hit
Pet
like
mention?
a bar with no name or something like that? That could have been basically Volvi's get out of jail free card.
Well, you have Blue Marvel into Ultron, which in a way is a really good combo when your board's empty. But I think at the moment, like, Fishu plays Devil Dinosaur, you kind of know this location is gone. Because, like, Devil Dinosaur with Orcus Forge is a really, really good combo because you're almost guaranteed your Dino is going to be a 15 or a 17 card. So we will see what Volvi decides to go for. But I think it's, yeah, Fishu kind of feels it. He's like, all right, I mean, I got to snap before it's too late. So what can Fishu do? What can Volvi do? Like, outside of Blue Marvel into Ultron, you don't have time to play Patriot, right? Or do you? Can you go like Sentinel Patriot into like Mystique Wasp and whatever you draw?
Yeah, you could. You've got the Onslaught as an option there, but Mystique definitely like on turn 6. I'd be surprised if Volvi stays in this one, considering how bad his early curve was.
And he's leaving again. So it's slow and steady, but for now, for Fishu, it's winning the race.
Yep. But we're still not in the high stakes, so, you know, like a couple of cubes here is a big deal, of course, but when it gets to the high stakes, that's when those kind of games really start hurting. When you just lose, even if it's just 2 cubes, that is a big dent into it. This is now, I do believe, round number 3.
Number 4.
Number 4.
Yeah, because he lost 3 health and he lost 1 every time.
Okay, so this is the weird round in Marvel Snap, where with Fishu's 10 health being an even number, he can essentially lose this cube for free because there's very little difference between 9 cubes and 10. Because in the high stakes, you're working in increments of 2. It's only even numbers of cubes you can lose. So Fishu essentially has like a free retreat here if he wants it.
And on the other end, Volvi being at 7 doesn't necessarily want to lose that cube because he would go to 6. And right now, when we start being in the high stakes, 7 is more of an 8 than it is than a 6.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this match is actually a big one because it's none of them kind of want to lose it too much, or like Fishu only wants to lose 1 basically.
Yeah. Fishu only wants to lose 1, but he would absolutely love to win 1. So round 4 is like the most interesting and intricate round in Marvel Snap Battle Mode.
And once again, like, it feels like Volvi has a really good setup on Shadowland because he already, like, it's turn 4 and he already locked the location, but he doesn't have the punish. Who snapped? Is it? Oh, come on.
You see the
He
snap?
leaves again. I feel like Volvi is playing very, very conservatively.
Yeah,
And because you locked the left location, I feel like this was your time to kind of maybe go into it and try it.
And if you think about it, right, like if he loses 2 cubes there, he's going to be on an odd number, right?
Yeah, you go back to 5. You
He
go
would
from
be
7 to 5.
He'd be at 5, which is essentially the same as 6 at this point of view. So it seems like a bad decision there to take the fold. I'm not sure if there's any benefit ever to folding there. I think that you're supposed to stay in that one. We see another early snap here.
I mean, Fishu just kind of is playing with his opponent at this point. Like, you're 10 to 6. So I feel like this is a really good snap because you have seen your opponent take your snaps very seriously up until this point.
Yep.
And we just enter the ice stakes. So I really like this. I feel like this is kind of poker snap. It's like, okay, you took the 1 cube snaps. Are you going to take the 2 cube snaps now, or are we going to play this game?
Yeah. And Volvi has decided to make his
Monster
stand.
Island is pretty good because that works with Patriot. This monster can be good, big for Volvi.
Also, the Shang-Chi
Yes.
is going to be very impactful into
We
the
got
Monster
Debris. Oh,
Island.
that's unlucky for Volvi because he played Debris and he get no rock on Lockjaw's lane. Pretty big. Iceman touching Misty Knight, so it's pretty unimpactful. I guess it's one of the best ones for Volvi to hit, and we're gonna play Misty Knight, and that's it.
A very weak turn 4 from both players. Misty Knight for Time Stone, but what will Lockjaw fetch?
Not so weak anymore.
And the Claw is great, but this is the lane that we were talking about is gonna be potentially a struggle for Fishu with the Shang-Chi. So maybe the
Yeah.
Claw, not the best at the end of the day, but having some points in that location while also having some more points in the middle is nice. The Mind Stone is going to come through. This is going to give Fishu the option on turn 6 to play a 6-cost card if he so wishes, like this Onslaught.
And I feel like Ultron's draw is kind of a bit of the punish for the weak turn Volvi had last turn, because now you're playing Shang-Chi on 5, so you're not playing Blue Marvel, so you don't get the bonus on Ultron if you go through. Well, I feel like sometimes when your hand is top heavy, you lose the element of surprise, but sometimes energies are stronger than surprise.
Monster Metropolis has a 12-point differential, but because it's currently in favor of Fishu with the highest card, if Volvi had a way of getting a bigger card, that would be a 6-power swing.
Well, there's
alone.
Onslaught that takes it, but Fishu is really sneaky, because if he gets Onslaught on Blue Marvel, Claw would become a 5. Because right now, if Volvi plays Blue Marvel, Debris and Shocker go up to 4, which means they tie Claw, and so Volvi gets several Monster Metropolis buff.
Yep.
But if Fishu plays Onslaught on Blue Marvel, Claw becomes a 5, and he takes it over again. So it's really difficult, and I think from Volvi's point of view, you just probably like take the safe one, which is Onslaught, because Onslaught is a plus 10 for you, minus 3 for your opponent, so it's a 13 differential, and you're at 12. So you should end up at plus 1, but there's that Onslaught from Fishu, which I think locks things out. I think this Onslaught just wins it.
This could be lethal for Volvi. He has 6 health remaining, and if both players lock it in, we are playing for 6 cubes. Of course, if he concedes, he's going to have to win 5 games in a row. So at this point, he might just have to go for it and hope.
Yeah, and I feel bad for Volvi because, as the chat is pointing out, like he hasn't drawn Patriot yet. But I feel in this game, it's really that Misty Knight on 4. I feel like we could have just gone with a Shang-Chi into Blue Marvel, and then you would have been able to play Ultron into that Monster Metropolis. And I don't know if it wins, but I think that's a much closer game. And now Volvi is at 2. So we retreated a lot. No more retreats. Not allowed anymore. The button is closed.
Oh my god. What has just happened? The Iron Man with the peak.
Yeah, and this is the worst thing for Volvi because he gets Cyclop and Onslaught touched, and top decks Patriot, which is one of the better ones to get. So this is really, really unfortunate.
Of course, this Iron Man as well, most likely just going to come down on turn number 6. It's just a surprise bit of value. No point of playing it early. Information is crucial in Marvel Snap, so just holding this 0-cost card until the final possible moment. You know there's no threat of Sandman, Leech because of the open deck lists.
Yeah, and it really feels like it might feel like Fishu is getting a little lucky. Like if we talked about the Lockjaw pulling the Blue Marvel in the previous series, and now we're seeing the peak on Iron Man and everything. But I think like the important thing with Fishu to understand is that he also creates these situations. I really like the way Fishu plays Marvel Snap overall, at least in tournament. I don't know if people have been checking his content or like stream, but I think in tournament, I really like he's a really serious player, and I feel like we can see who has like background in like poker and that kind of games compared to the people that have started with Marvel Snap, because Fishu, I think all the snaps were like super smart this series. Like he just created a corner and like pushed Volvi into it with literally just snapping at the right time.
Yeah, he just bled him out, right? Like made Volvi pay to play, and in this last game we saw that really pay off with him winning that 4-cube game, which otherwise would have most likely just been a 2-cube game. Shuri's Lab is the location to the right. The Reality Stone comes middle. And the hub is the option. This is where, again, Volvi just needed this to really...
Valkyrie is pretty good in Patriot.
Yeah, Valkyrie
heard-
definitely not bad. Unfortunately,
Well-
Valkyrie not going to deal with Devil Dinosaur because
Well, it's
of
really
the
bad
ongoing.
against ongoing because I mean, when I think when Volvi's gonna see that 0-5 Iron Man, he's gonna be a little pissed,
Yeah. I think you might be right.
and Valkyrie won't be able to help with that. So
And it's almost like
Boy.
extending his suffering, because in a normal Marvel Snap game there would be a snap and a turn 1 retreat, right? But because there's no point
Yeah.
of snapping or retreating,
and,
like Volvi's just kind of got to wait this whole time.
and it really feels like Fishu can't lose this one because what's gonna happen, I think, is Onslaught to the left, Iron Man in the middle. Good luck. Like he's just gave up on Shuri's life. He's like, yeah, you can have it. Oh, okay, he's gonna Iron Man on the right because I really like. If you onslaught left, you double claw, and then Iron Man doubles that again. So like even if you have nothing on the hub, I think you would have been at like 20. So you would have been at 12. You would have been at 34 on the hub with 2 stones on it. Okay, we're completely changing the play from Fishu's side. I think this is really strong too. I mean, as long as there's that Iron Man in the play, it's gonna be a very strong play.
It's going to be hard to lose, right? Especially with that armor protecting the Devil Dinosaur, no threat of Shang-Chi onto the Dino. That's going to be very important here for Fishy's thinking. If that Shang-Chi was a threat, he might not feel so confident about winning this left lane. Here we go. Is
Yep,
this the final game of the series?
And
I think it
fun-
must be.
Funnily enough, this is the first round of this match that goes the distance.
Yeah.
Volvi retreated everything else. And yeah, Volvi's gonna see the Iron Man at 0, and he just knows, like, sometimes you just know, okay, that wasn't my series.
Yeah.
Like, you see that Iron Man, you're just like, alright, Marvel's not picked one guy. Like, Volvi just ends, like, top 4. You start the tournament 1 and 2, you go to top 4. Like, that's pretty strong. Like, I think he went on a... He went 1 and 2 to 5 and 2, and then won 2 more matches. So he was on a 6-0 streak before that match, and unfortunately, like, streaks need a bit of luck, and at some point you run out of it, and that's the end of the run for Volvi. And so we're gonna have Fishu against Moyen.
Oh,
That's a match I want to watch because we got, I think, in my opinion, one of the best French guys in tournaments. Like, Fishu doesn't play a ton, but when he plays in tournaments, he shows up. Like, he won the last one. If you watch his stream, like, he's a completely different person when he plays a tournament. And this is a guy that has said in the interview, my lineup sucks. I'm unfavored against almost everyone. And he's like, top 3? Imagine what he does with a good lineup.
Yeah, 'cause we've seen them a lot. We've got Fishu with his Thanos Lockjaw, which we've just seen. We've got Electro Greedy
Yes.
as well. And then we can look at Moyens first, because
I mean, I think it's a pretty clear pick from both players. Like, Moyen brought the Patriot for Fishu's lineup. So Fishu's lineup, I think, has to go with Electro Greedy because he knows Thanos Lockjaw is going to be destroyed every time Super Scrolls comes out. So we will see how this goes. But I think at least the pick is pretty logical from Moyen's side. And if you can guess Moyen, Fishu can probably know what he's going to pick as well.
so you think we're seeing Patriot on one end and Thanos Lockjaw on the other? Is that like your best bet
No,
of beating-
Electro Greedy on the other.
Oh, because
Because
with
Super
the-
Scroll just can't stall Thanos
with
Lockjaw.
the claw, the onslaught, the dino. But yeah, I mean, Patriot has really found its way into the meta in a lot of ways to beat Electro. So it does seem like Moyen is going to be in the driving seat. Also, like, what do you think about Moyen's Sandman deck with no Odin?
Well, we talked about it a lot with the Lobster in the previous match, and I think it's crazy.
I think it's insane.
Like, I think it's
very
crazy
brave.
because to me, Odin and Doom. I think Odin and Doom are the two I wouldn't cut because they go together, and it felt like really smart. But I feel like it also made him very weak to Shang-Chi in a lot of spots. So I think the idea is really smart. The same way as like Super Scroll is extremely smart in Patriot, but I think probably it wouldn't be Odin. I think I would either risk it, like remove Chavez.
Get
and
rid of, you get rid of the
maybe.
Jeff. Never
No,
Chavez.
to me, I think
My
personally,
heart.
I would probably remove Leader or Magneto. If I had to remove one,
Yep.
it would be Leader or Magneto and put Odin back in.
For me, it's Jeff. I don't think Jeff belongs in Sandman
Jeff
personally.
did some dirty things in the
Yeah.
match. Like, he did the first matches of Moyen, it was Ebony Moyen to Jeff, and Jeff was like super tricky to play around.
Yeah, Jeff's amazing, but like you could put a Nightcrawler in there as well, for example. You don't see Nightcrawler that often.
Well, you can play Nightcrawler behind Ebony Moyen.
That's very true. But you could move it in there, of course.
Of course, but that's the beauty with Jeff. You play it behind Ebony Moyen, and
Yep.
you still have the move.
Yeah, no,
Kind of.
like Jeff is like fine in Sandman, but For an Odin, it's just, for me, I really struggle to see, like, if you don't want to cut, speaking to Moyne, he was like, well, we don't want to cut Magneto, we don't want to cut Doom, we want the leader, we want the Zola, we want the Dino, but then I feel like Jeff is like the weakest slot in this one, personally. But I think like the big thing about no Odin, it's not even like you don't have to play Odin, it's that you don't have the threat of Odin.
Yeah.
Because on turn 6 in open deck lists, if you're expecting that Odin to come, you have to respect it, and that's going to change your play significantly. Whereas if that Odin isn't even there, you don't have to play around it, right?
Definitely.
Which is just like one less power play.
Yeah, I definitely agree with your assessment. Like, probably like we'll get Moyen on cast at some point, and I guess that's a question I really want to ask him. But for now, I am going to leave my spot to Fresh Lobster for this big match. This is the medals match. I'm excited. I'm going to find a couch and watch this.
The crustacean sensation. Please, can you take the saucisson so I don't...
I'll get one later, thank you. Yeah.
Hello, Mr. Lobster. How are you doing, my friend?
Thank you very much. I am glad to be joining the Absolute Geezer again on the broadcast deck. Let's go. The Dream Team is united once again.
I'm so excited for this one.
This is going to be a banger, especially because these players have already played before. I got some insider knowledge in earlier on. They were playing in the group stage, and it was apparently a very interesting matchup because it started off with an 8-cube game as the very first game.
Neither player messing around.
Exactly, and that game went to Fishu, apparently in a very, very close fashion. Did find the Thanos that got buffed to 20, and that was the only card that would beat Moyen, but Fishu had it ready. Took 8 cubes of Moyen. Moyen stayed in it for another like 3 games or so. Almost pulled off the miracle comeback, but Fishu did prevail and get out as the winner here. Now they're both facing again in the losers bracket finals for a shot at a grand finals spot.
Yeah, and what you mentioned there about winning that big 8-cube game, Fishu is saying that he's very unfavored in this matchup in his interviews against Moyen. Like, just looking at the decks, you have to think that Moyen is super favored. And in a spot like that, your best chance to win when you have, let's say, like a 20% win rate average, is to win a really big high-stakes game. So that's something we might be looking to see again. And Moyen really then should try to be avoiding these big high-stakes games. So maybe he has to be very careful with his snaps, because if he's snapping early, that means that he's then opening up the potential for it to be an 8-cube game.
But he can't be too scared. I do think I did like the aggressive approach with the Sandman snaps so far, or the snaps right before showing Electro. I think it's more on Fishu to do the right thing, not to get too greedy, retreat a lot. Yep. If the opening is unfavored, but then pick the spots carefully.
Pick the moment.
And then basically check raise Moyen, like take the snap and snap back later on once you do find a good opening. The game starts here, and we do see an Iceman opening on Fishu's side. Moyen this time going for the Patriot deck with the Super Skrull tech.
The Super Skrull versus Onslaught with Claw, with Dino. This is one saucy 5 energy Super Skrull, because Iceman's just hit it.
And Fishu might rinse and repeat here, just play Iceman multiple times over and over. This is a popular strategy when cloning VATS is a location, because it breaks your opponent's combos apart super heavily.
The Soul Stone also going down into cloning VATS is a really good option. Of course, you're drawing a card with the Soul Stone, but also it can play for 5 points. Although, that is another card that the Super Skrull can copy, of course. Now, Fishu's like best approach might be to consider like, okay, well, I need to pick my moment. I just need to pray that Moyen has missed Super Skrull in this specific game. And at some point.
You know what's really nasty here is that Moyen can play Super Skrull twice as well. Might go into cloning VATS once, might go into nowhere once. But the Iceman is going to matter here. That makes it much more of a commitment on Moyen's side.
So for those that aren't familiar with Super Skrull, because it is a lesser spotted card, it was a Series 5 card. I believe it's now Series 3 very recently.
Yes.
So it is a 4 energy card at 2 stats, and it is copying the ongoing abilities of every card your opponent plays. So it can be an Iron Man, a Devil Dinosaur, an Onslaught, all on one single card.
And especially in matchups like these, that can be a blowout. That can almost win matches on its own. This is an interesting line of play Fishu decides to take. Wants to shut down the cloning VATS now. Fishu is basically saying, okay, I have had enough gains from this cloning VATS. I don't want my opponent to copy a Patriot on this turn. Before that happens, I turn cloning VATS into something entirely new.
Well, one player's locked their play, and it looks like Fishu's locked his play in, but we're seeing the big rope from Moyen really thinking through his plays. The Reality Stone comes through, Bar with no name
It's
is
Bar
there.
with no name.
I've been
Okay.
calling it all day. I've been waiting for the reality stone into Bar with no name, and it's finally happened.
But this is so weird, even if you're in Moyen's shoes now, because now that kind of locks you out of Patriot. Right? As soon as you play Patriot, you win the Bar with no name. But is the Super Skrull on his own enough to just win a second location? The answer might very well be yes.
Yep. It's already going to be 2 Soul Stones. Professor X could be the way for Fishu to maybe just shut down a location. It's a really exciting one here. Yeah, and as you mentioned, Patriot no longer an option because that is going to buff the Wasp and the Misty Knight both by 2 points, which would put Moyen at 5 and therefore losing Bar of No Name. Very obvious. Bar of No Name gets kind of weird. Lots of people. Have you ever Green Goblin the Bar of No Name thinking you would win, or is that just me?
I don't think I've ever been in this situation before, but I can totally get the sentiment.
I think there's quite a lot. Guys, in the chat, press 1 if you have Green Goblin or Hobgoblin the Bar of No Name, thinking you'd win and then realizing you lose.
And if you have never done it, press F for specimen.
Yeah. We see the snap. Moyen with the IRL snap. What a guy. This is what we love to see.
And Fishu does take the retreat this time around. Not an explosive start the same way that their previous meeting went. But in this case, Moyen comes out ahead with the early psychological advantage. And we do hop straight into round 2.
Yeah, we saw Fishu writing down some notes, taking his time in previous matchups. This one at the end of the game, he's ready to go again.
Onslaught Citadel with 2 ongoing decks. And Super Skrull has to be happy about that just coming off the top of the deck of Moyen.
Do you think that you could snap if you're Moyen on turn 1 here? Like with the Super Scroll draw?
The interesting thing is, you could, but why would you? You're not playing a card. You can get more information for free, wait to see the other locations first. This would be a value snap, right? You don't want to scare your opponent off. You rather want to tell them, I don't have a card I can play here, and keep them in the game for longer.
So what you're saying with the value snap, like, or rather, if you were to snap turn 1, it would be incorrect because you may as well just wait until turn 2, see what the middle location is, for example.
Exactly, because you're not showing your strength until turn 2 the earliest. Or with other decks, it could even be turn 3. So you can get the free information, how good is my opponent's hand, and do the location screw me over or not. In this case, it's not happening for Moyen. Shocker comes out on the right side. And Fishu is surely not going to move that Mind Stone around, but Moyen can reach Sanctum Sanctorum quite effectively if he should find the Ultron eventually.
Not a typical line here from Fishu to play the Lockjaw into a very full location, but he's going to probably want to avoid playing all these big cards into the Citadel and then getting shuffled with Lockjaw. Like, one interesting thing with the change to Lockjaw, previously, if you wanted to put big stats into the Lockjaw lane, it would be very difficult. You would have to high roll. But now, you can play a Reality Stone into the Lockjaw, which swaps, and then something like a Dino actually stays and sticks. So, in some ways, like, the Thanos deck in some niche situations actually got better. Obviously, overall, it got a lot worse, but that's something to look out for.
This is a very interesting game indeed. An unconventional line of play here with the Lockjaw Time Stone, but it does ramp Fishu into 5 energy next turn. So Fishu could go 5-drop into 5-drop. We see Moyen with a snap that almost looked a bit, I don't know, frustrated.
He needs a little bit of work on his sassy snap.
Exactly. The facial expression does not match the alpha play that he is putting out. Feels a bit tenured, a bit laborious.
Yeah.
But I think this is gonna... I'll let him know. He's gonna have to work on this.
The Super Scroll is down in Onslaught Citadel. There is a whole bunch of ongoing cards available for Fishu, which are no longer going to be options. Now, it could be a potential for like Moyen to try and hold this Super Scroll in until turn 6 for like that surprise value. But with cards like Ultron, he might be wanting to play those to get the points into Sanctumorium. And there also could be some like niche situations where, like, if he holds the Super Scroll until turn 6, plays it on turn 6, Fishu could just decide to play no ongoing cards at all and take a change of plan. Play something like the Chavez.
This is an interesting spot for Fishu for picking up the Reality Stone and can therefore kind of contest the Super Skrull's true power. Because Super Skrull, of course, benefits the most from Onslaught Citadel. Does drop the Devil Dinosaur into the waiting hands of Super Skrull.
So many points are about to enter Onslaught Citadel, but one thing the Dino does is it's a lot better for Fishu because he has those extra cards in hand. The Mystique
copying the Super Skrull. Never mind what I just said, what Spessy just said. now having full control over the Onslaught Citadel, and I don't think there's a way out here for Fishu.
Are you dizzy? This is the dirtiest play I've ever seen. What I want to see Fishu here do is slam the Iron Man into Devil Dinosaur and then just retreat on turn 6 because he's losing, surely.
Just for the memes, just for the 1 gazillion billion
just to
power
see the
number.
biggest Super Scroll of all time.
Does
see
have
the
to
armor and the Reality Stone? Reality Stone obviously pulling away Citadel, and like this is actually, it makes a lot of sense, right? You could hit something like Bar with no name and turn the tides on this matchup potentially.
It is a bit of a desperation play. It is a Hail Mary long shot, but this is all that Fishu has left in this very current situation. The only question I will throw at you, Specimen, is do you think Fishu should have stayed here? Was it a good spot? Or should he have left to Moyen Snap, knowing that Onslaught Citadel is a very tricky location to handle?
That's a big question as we see the Abomination come down, the Wasp. It's a really tricky one. I honestly don't know. I think like the Sanctumorium is pretty bad, but like Fishu like has to make a stand at some point, right?
That is actually a good point. I'm a bit surprised to see the Wasp come out because it makes both Super Skrulls smaller. And he has Ultron in hand anyway and locked himself out of the location. I'm not quite sure what the reasoning behind this was. Would be interesting to know.
Yeah, it's a really good point. The Big House is the final location. The Reality Stone, therefore, locking Fishu out of being able to play a card. Well, he can play his 1-point Time Stone. It is going to draw him a card as well, so his Devil Dinosaur will stay at the current power.
The Big House is actually more devastating for Fishu than for Moyen right now, because Fishu cannot play his Claw to the left anymore to support Sanctum Sanctorum, and he has to be worried of Moyen potentially holding the Ultron.
Yeah, it's a really good point. This seems like it could have actually been a pretty decent spot for Fishu if it wasn't for the Big House. Like, he maybe would have had a chance.
The Reality
so
Stone.
The decision to stay in, he found a moment where he could potentially win. He needs to be bold. He can't retreat every game, right? And I think it seems like it was actually a really good decision from Fishu to stay in. There was maybe a chance he had that on another day. Which is obscene because it looked like it was over. I was calling him to just play the Iron Man for the content. The turn 1 snap comes through. And oh my goodness, I didn't see Fishu do anything, but I did see Moyen have a little like, really? You're going to snap me right now, mate?
Ah, interesting. Wait, did the snap come from Fishu?
Yeah, it must have done with Moyo's reaction.
And Moyen has to be happy about this. Early curve, Patriot in hand, and you are very likely to draw into some other power cards later on, whether it will be Mystique, whether it will be Super Skrull, or just the good old Ultron should be enough to take control here.
I actually love this snap from Fishu, you know, because like, he can't just accept that he's in a bad matchup and just let Moyen just lead him down, right? He needs to be aggressive at some point. He likes his hand, and he just maybe says, well, hopefully this is a game where Moyen misses his Super Scroll. Maybe he retreats and gives me a 1 cube. So I love it from Fishu. It's bold, it's brave.
Yeah. And this is something that he has to do here, take the calculated risks, but this is about the best situation he can have. This is about as good of an opening hand as he can get. And he can't wish for more. The matchup is going to be doomed no matter what. So gotta take chances.
It's bad news for Fishu, though, with the draw for Moyen. The Super Scroll has entered the building, ladies and gentlemen.
And also, Daily Bugle has been popping up a lot today, and gives important information. Copying key cards on both sides. Moyen now knows Fishu is holding an Onslaught.
And also, this opens up the Super Scroll onto Onslaught line as well.
Ooh, that is a very good point that I have not yet considered. But the Super Skrull copying a Patriot would actually be completely cracked.
Yep.
Is Fishu going to play a Patriot though? No real upside to it.
Seeing the Lockjaw is down into Camp Lehigh here. The armor in Bugle and the Sacred Timeline on the right, not usually a very impactful location in my experience. Of course, there's other locations like the Raft where if you fill them, it's a huge advantage. But the Sacred Timeline, not really one that, it's very rare that it's actually relevant. Could be some points on Dinosaur later on.
What's interesting about Fishu's hand here is that Camp Lehigh actually really smoothed out his mana curve. He can now basically play a 1-drop into Lockjaw every turn and still support the same turn with playing a card like Hulkbuster, with maybe playing a card like Patriot. Does opt to go for another line of play and play all of the 1-drops. Reality Stone trying to get rid of the Sacred Timeline. Bit surprising to me, but I think Fishu just really values drawing here, cycling through his deck and trying to find some other key cards for this matchup.
Yeah, the Iceman, the decision to put into the Lockjaw, of course, with the change to the Lockjaw, if you're not aware, you can only cycle one card a turn with Lockjaw. Previously, this would have been a play where we would see the Soul Stone, the Reality Stone maybe even going down into the Lockjaw location. And Iceman is the choice because it's a very high impact card, potentially if it comes back later off of your Lockjaw, compared to maybe like a Soul Stone could have also been good, but you'd rather have the Soul Stone on the board, whereas the Iceman has the value on the on-reveal ability rather than its presence on the board.
Do see Wasp coming out, followed up by the Super Scroll. Fishu's nemesis in this matchup so far.
Yeah, and at least for Fishu, like, he knows it's the— oh!
Popping out the Iron Man, but it does benefit Moyen much more. The Iron Man has betrayed Fishu.
This Super Scroll is absolutely obscene. The main criticism I have really of Moyen is the fact that he's got the Super Scroll and he doesn't have, like, he's got the common border. He has no cool variant because there's some saucy Super Scroll variants. I'm going to ask Moyen to check his shop and I will personally pay for him if he has a Super Scroll variant in his shop and he makes it further into the final.
That is a great point you're making. Apparently the story behind the Super Scroll tag was that they were originally not even considering it, not wanting to go for it in the first place, trying out some other tag choices. And I think on this morning, or late last night when everyone went to bed, someone had the Super Scroll idea, texted and called everyone else, they tried it out, and it worked out well. So it was probably just unlocked or just purchased. Doesn't really have boosters on the card yet. And that's why it's OG Super Scroll looking like it was randomly generated, but was put into this deck with a lot of purpose in mind.
Yeah, Moyen actually ended up spending like 12,000 tokens on cards the day before the decks were submitted. He got like Dark Court because he wanted to test it. He tested out some other cards as well. So he's needing some credits, this boy. He got some tokens, rather.
Yeah, he got everyone's sweetheart as well. Jeff was part of the 12,000 token purchase, and Moyen goes for the snap back. It was a little bit more sauce.
It's improving. Yeah. It is improving.
Moyen's attitude is improving. We love to see it here.
And we're locked in. Ladies and gentlemen, Fishu has decided to make his stand, and it is brave. In a normal matchup, you would fold here. But Fishu needs this big, high cube victory.
And the debris is enormous here. I think Fishu was wanting to go for the middle and the right side, and the rock just taking Fishu's playmaking ability on the right side away. Now Moyen, well, it's also hard for him to grow significantly larger on the right side though. He doesn't have very high power cards, but as soon as Fishu plays a card from hand, Dino goes down to 70.
Yeah, exactly.
Ultron right side seems super safe.
Yep, the Dino is, if a card is played, going to be losing points. Now, interestingly, Fishu's line could be something like play a Time Stone, which draws him a card.
Yes.
He has the Soul Stone,
but
which would but the Patriot's on the board.
Yeah, Ultron is gonna lose Murder World by 1, but Daily Bugle will be 1 because the drone will be Patriot buffed. This is incredibly close, but I don't see a way out for Fishu here. Well, unless Moyen does not go for Ultron. And
yep, this is a 7-cube game. If both players lock in their plays, this is exactly where Fishu wants to be in many ways. A high-stakes game before it's too late. He has to go for it. He's made his stand. The decision has been made. But for Moyen, he still has the option to retreat.
This looks like Onslaught is coming down into the middle instead. It is such a tough decision to make.
Both players still unsure.
Time is running out.
Right down to the rope.
Time Stone Hulkbuster.
The Hulkbuster is going to mean that the Devil Dinosaur is less points to the right. What do we see?
It's Ultron is coming down, and it will take down the Devil Dinosaur. And I think this is it. Fishu should be at 17 on the right side, just barely losing by 1 point. And this was a 7-cube game. GG's. Moyen gets his revenge.
I have to say, what a performance from Fishu, though. He lost it, but what an unbelievable performance. Getting that high-stakes game in such a bad matchup to lose by a single point on the right. He found his moment, he picked it, and on another day, it could have gone his way.
And it did go this way in the group stage, unfortunately for Fishu, not on the big stage. But that's all you can do in these very unfavored situations. Calculated risk-taking, I was impressed by Fischer as well. That was exactly what he went for, even though we were scared almost. Like, we were saying, oh, really staying in this for this many cubes? But it almost paid off, and that's the best shot you have sometimes in these card games like Marvel Snap.
I think that's the best performance you will ever see from a 10-0 defeat, right? He lost 10 cubes to 0, but he played phenomenally.
Yeah.
Phenomenally.